The British government's plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda has finally been approved by Parliament, resolving a long-standing disagreement between the lower and upper chambers about the legality of the policy. According to the new legislation, asylum seekers who enter Britain illegally will be sent to Rwanda. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has stated that the first deportation flight could happen as early as July, with more deportations to follow throughout the summer. Thousands of people have crossed the English Channel in small boats in recent years, many of them escaping war and poverty. The government argues that this policy aims to deter risky crossings in small boats and dismantle people smuggling networks. However, human rights groups have criticized the scheme, calling it inhumane and illegal. They argue that there's no evidence it will stop human trafficking or dangerous boat journeys. Despite Rwanda's reputation as one of the more stable countries in Africa, critics claim that President Paul Kagame's rule is marked by a climate of fear and repression. Here's a breakdown of the bill and the legal challenges it has faced in the past and present. Why has the bill faced so many delays? In June 2022, the first flight to deport refugees to Rwanda was halted at the last minute by the European Court of Human Rights, ECHR. Last year, the United Kingdom Supreme Court ruled that the deportation scheme was unlawful because the government could not ensure the safety of migrants after they arrived in Rwanda. The court upheld a UK Court of Appeal ruling, citing substantial concerns that asylum seekers sent to Rwanda could face a high risk of mistreatment or deportation back to their home countries. The evidence was based on Rwanda's poor human rights record and its flawed system for processing asylum applications. The court pointed out that Rwanda has a high rate of rejecting asylum claims from certain countries known to have conflicts. Furthermore, Rwanda's previous agreement with Israel showed its disregard for non-refoulement principles. Between 2013 and 2018, Rwanda deported thousands of refugees sent under Israel's voluntary departure scheme. Steve Valdez-Simmons, Amnesty International UK's Refugee and Migrant Rights Director, said that the Supreme Court examined the case closely and concluded that Rwanda didn't have the proper systems in place to protect refugees. What does the Rwanda bill say? The Safety of Rwanda bill, passed early Tuesday, is designed to bypass the Supreme Court's ruling by labeling Rwanda as a safe country for deportation. This approach came after the British government signed a new agreement with the East African country last year. The new treaty was intended to strengthen safeguards, ensuring that asylum seekers sent to Rwanda would not be deported to any country except the UK. Does this make deportation to Rwanda safer for asylum seekers? Human rights groups say it does not. According to Valdez-Simmons, the Supreme Court has already determined that Rwanda's asylum system is unsafe and unreliable. He questioned why Rwanda's new promises should be trusted. He stated that the government, instead of helping Rwanda improve over time, decided to get a larger promise from Rwanda and act like everything is fine. He added that this bill suspends parts of the UK's Human Rights Act, which is based on the European Convention on Human Rights, allowing ministers to choose whether or not to follow any ECHR injunctions. Valdez-Simmons described it as turning off the Human Rights Act for this purpose. If the ECHR tries to prevent or delay a deportation flight, UK courts are instructed to ignore it unless a minister decides the injunction must be followed. Valdez-Simmons said this bill sets a dangerous and wrong precedent. If Parliament has the power to do this and courts agree, it could be used for any other action the government wants if it pressures Parliament to pass a law. It could apply to any group of people. When will deportations to Rwanda start? The bill is set to receive royal assent to become law. Sunak announced on Monday that flights will begin within 10 to 12 weeks, saying, "No ifs, no buts. These flights are going to Rwanda." He did not say how many people would be deported or the exact dates for the flights. In preparation for the bill's approval, Sunak mentioned that the government has already chartered planes for the deportations, increased detention capacity, hired more immigration caseworkers, and freed up court time to handle appeals. How much will this scheme cost British taxpayers? The National Audit Office, a public spending watchdog, estimated that deporting the first 300 migrants would cost the UK £540 million, $669 million, nearly £2 million per person. Currently, the UK spends over £3 billion, $3.7 billion, a year on processing asylum applications, with the cost of housing migrants awaiting decisions reaching about £8 million, $9.9 million per day. How effective will this scheme be in addressing existing asylum claims? Statistics indicate that there are about 100,000 asylum applications pending. Charities have stated that the scheme isn't practical and, considering the small number of people involved, would barely reduce the backlog of asylum claims. Even if everything goes perfectly for the government, the Rwanda scheme will only remove a maximum of 5,000 people per year out of the tens of thousands excluded from the asylum system, explained Enver Solomon, CEO of the Refugee Council, a UK charity, in an email to Al Jazeera. To build a fair and controlled asylum system, we need quick and precise decisions on asylum claims, he added. The government should focus on processing asylum claims instead of wasting time and money, he suggested. Valdez-Simons noted that despite the government touting the bill for the last 2 years, refugees continued to arrive in Britain because they were truly desperate. Our country isn't addressing the factors that push them to take these risky journeys, so this trend will continue, he remarked. If asylum claims aren't processed, it's no wonder the backlog grows. Could other legal challenges to this bill be mounted? Despite the bill's approval, Sunak is likely to encounter additional legal challenges. The ECHR might again issue orders to halt deportation flights. Earlier this year, ECHR President Siofra O'Leary mentioned that member states had a clear obligation to consider Rule 39 orders, which are interim injunctions issued by the Strasbourg-based court. Sunak hinted that the government was ready to disregard the ECHR if it tried to block deportations. No foreign court will stop us from getting flights off, Sunak stated. We are prepared, plans are set, and these flights will go, regardless of what happens. Trade unions have suggested that they might pursue legal action, stating that ministers would need Parliament to modify the Civil Service Code if they intended to instruct government employees to ignore ECHR rulings. The trade union representing border force personnel has vowed to challenge the new legislation's legality as soon as the first asylum seekers are told they will be deported to Rwanda. UN human rights experts have cautioned that airlines and aviation regulators might breach international human rights laws if they participate in these deportations. Will this bill stand the test of time? With a general election expected later this year or early next year, Prime Minister Sunak hopes the new law will revive the flagging popularity of his Conservative Party, which promised stricter immigration policies after the UK left the European Union. Critics argue that the bill could lead to Parliament passing laws on issues that courts have already declared illegal, potentially undermining the UK's international reputation. This is seen as a slippery slope that could harm the UK's standing worldwide. You have to consider the political consequences, Valdez-Simons commented. The UK is signaling. When we make an agreement, remember that we might not keep our promises because when things don't work for us, we unilaterally decide not to follow them anymore, he added. Countries that value international law may view the UK negatively, while those with little regard for human rights might approve, he noted. He pointed out that a disregard for human rights obligations is one of the main reasons people leave their countries and come to the UK in the first place. The Conservative Party is currently behind the opposition Labour Party in opinion polls. Labour has pledged to scrap the Rwanda scheme if it comes to power. In an interview with Sky News, Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper stated on Tuesday that Labour would replace the Rwanda scheme with cross-border policing and a new returns and enforcement unit. She explained, "We are not going to implement the Rwanda scheme because it requires writing more checks every time.